Good afternoon to one and all. Today we have Mr. Neeraj over here with us who's going to speak about climate change and renewable technologies of energy. Mr. Neeraj has done his University from Chemical Engineering and he has done his Masters from Australian National University. I'd like to welcome the audience for giving their time, and I would like to tell the audience that you have to post the questions regarding to the climate change and renewable resource of energy, and we will take it one at a time. Sir, I'd like to start the conversation now.
Oh, good. Thank you, Anam. That was a very brief and good introduction that we had. Hi, everybody. Myself, Neeraj, and today I'm going to be talking about climate change and renewable energy, which is what my course has been as a master's student. As Anand has already introduced me, I've done my chemical engineering between 2013 and 17 from SRM. I graduated in May of 17, and I joined the ANU in July 2017. And I'm yet to finish a semester of my study. I think that got mixed and jumbled up somewhere through the conversation. But yeah, so this is my final semester at the university, doing masters in renewable energy engineering. And whilst I'm working part-time, basically I'm a consultant advisor with Electromotive and carbon neutral delivery partners. So my work primarily comprises of doing analyst and advisory role, basically. I consult with companies on things like, so Electromotive, this company works on delivering electric and hydrogen transport fleet to governments and other fleet operators, like say there's a private bus operator, let's say, or somebody who have water trucks or some delivery or some sort of transport trucks. So basically, essentially dealing with public transport and private transport, passenger vehicles, not small scale LEVs, not light vehicles, but the heavy vehicle segment. So buses, water trucks, and public transport in general. So electrification of that sort of transport is what I'm dealing with at Electromotive. And at Carbon Neutral Delivery Partners, we basically focus on, so that's a consultancy firm, and we focus primarily on delivering net neutral projects and carbon neutral and net zero emission projects, just as, well, it's a lot of proprietary material, so I'm not exactly allowed to talk about that. But just to give you a brief introduction on what carbon neutral delivery projects are, it's essentially, think of let's say, just think of SRM, all right, a university. And so SRM has got many different buildings, and all these buildings have different sort of energy usage. And one building is mostly operational during the daytime, and some buildings are operational throughout the day. Some buildings are operational particularly, evening time, like the mess, evening, or whatever time you go to have food in those places. So essentially, it's about having different load profiles from different buildings and different sets of a compound, let's say a boundary or a community. Let's say SRM itself, it's a community settlement. You've got administrative buildings, education buildings, classes, you've got mess, you've got hostels, you've got sports complexes and cafeteria and different things. So they have different sort of load profiles every hour of the day, every 5 minutes of the day, every 30 minutes of the day. So basically, essentially establishing a microgrid. To understand what a microgrid is, you first need to understand that there's the electricity that comes to your house. It's coming from not directly from the source where it is generated. Okay, it's actually the source, the thermal power plant or whatever energy generation source there is that produces electricity. That goes into a substation, and then that goes into the grid. Grid is a wide transmission and distribution network. Okay, so directly you do not have the electricity being generated at a nuclear power facility coming directly to your house, right? It sort of flows, and there's transmissions and other things involved. I'll talk about it in a bit. So this sort of a big system is a grid, all right? Now creating a microgrid is making a small, just the same thing in a very small community space, establishing that. And these microgrids have to be smart so that the demand management of energy is undertaken in a manner where, let's say, one guy is not at home. So all of these community settlements, they've got solar power on their houses, and they've got battery systems, and some of them, they have potentially electric vehicles with them. So what happens is, when somebody is not at home during the daytime, all the energy that they produce during the day is not being utilized, all right, with using the solar power panels. So that energy will be sent out into the grid where the load, where the demand is asking the out of the microgrid, where the demand is asking, there's a load at a different house or maybe a different conference center, other places within that community. Whoever's connected, whoever's plugged into that microgrid, basically. So whoever is having that demand or that load at that time, all the energy will be transported or exported, or transported, exported rather, to them. And if actually if you are producing a lot of energy as compared to what your demand is, you can even export this energy that you've created locally to the grid. All right. And this has a cost as well. So when you do that, as a community, you get some benefits from the grid. Either they are knocked off of your electricity bills, or you get some different sorts of incentives. I'll just talk, it's called feed-in tariff. I'll talk about it just as I'm talking about climate change and renewable energy. So we are the guys who are responsible for designing this entire project, this entire solution of a smart grid, of a microgrid for a community settlement to manage demand, manage the demand of energy and electricity at the space. And so the future of energy, as it's always been talked about, is electricity, right? Electrification of everything, because electricity is easy to store, transport, and hassle-free, and has practically no emissions in terms of energy itself. All right. Do not worry about the source that it is coming from. I'm just talking about the form of energy, the mode of energy. It is really convenient as compared to mechanical or kinetic or any other, or thermal, as a matter of fact, right? You have fairly lesser losses in electrical energy as compared to everything else. So yeah, that's what pretty much it is. And I work on advising whoever the client is. We have got different clients, and I advise different clients on how to go about this project and how to get things done. There's a lot of things. There's funding, there's approvals, there's a million other things which then collaborate, and then we combine all that together, and I work to deliver those projects. Okay. Now, so that was a brief introduction about myself. It was not at all brief. I completely understand. Sorry if you guys at all bored with this, but it was essential to understand where I'm coming from. Okay. Now, so talking about climate change and renewable energy sources, as I had cited, we need to understand that there is something called climate change, and it is not a myth. Okay. We have, I should have had some data background to show this to you, but due to some logistical errors, I could not just fathom that I will have some data for this. Anywho, believe my word, I'm not kidding about this. I'm a master's student in this. I'm somebody who's qualified in the same area as such. And mind you, I'm not kidding about this. Yes, there is climate change. And it is not that we have become less tolerant. No, it's not that. There are people who have been like anti-climate change, or people who say that climate change is just a scary word that these scientists or these engineers are trying to, push into the world so that they can extract more money for their research and everything. Actually, climate change is nothing. So I'm really sorry to shatter the glass for everybody who thinks in that manner. No, climate change is real, and we've been experiencing it. We've seen massive rise of sea levels. Not exactly massive, but in terms of what it should have been, we have seen a great increase. All right, we have seen a shift in global temperatures, which is pretty evident. Shimla, let's say, for example, Shimla is not supposed to be 30 degrees in winter. During summers. During summers, Shimla's average temperature used to be about 25, 28. Now the average temperatures that Shimla looks at during summers is about 30, 35, sometimes even reaching 38 degrees Celsius, which, my dear friends, is a lot. And that we've seen that's a very fair example of climate change. Then there's sea level rising, then you've got the Antarctic ice glaciers melting and other things like that. So that's pretty evident in itself that yes, climate change is real, and it's not a hoax that the engineers, us engineers, or climate scientists or climate economists as such are creating to hoard up more money or to extract more money from the government or from taxpayers' money or from institutions as such. So yeah, climate change, big thing. Now, what do we do about this climate change? Climate change, there have been a lot of conventions, a lot of protocols, a lot of talk, a lot of discussions by countries world over. There was Kyoto Protocol, there was Copenhagen Convention, there was the most recent Paris Summit, right? So Paris Accord, basically. So that's the Paris Agreement. What countries have voluntarily come up and signed for is those are called INDCs, right? Which are basically non-compliant agreements or voluntary agreements, not mandatory. Complete countries are not required to follow through with this. It's just a voluntary act by countries that they've signed to make sure that the global temperatures do not rise more than 2 degrees Celsius by 2050. Okay, so with the business as usual, as we have the amount of coal-fired power plants we have, the amount of gas turbines and gas-fired power plants we are using, and the sort of fossil fuel consumption that we have, the global temperatures are going to rise because what happens is greenhouse gases, they are released just like carbon dioxide, methane, NOx, basically nitrous trioxide, nitrous oxide, and then there's sulfur dioxide, so NOx and SOx, and CO2, methane, and there's a couple of other greenhouse gases, which are responsible essentially for global warming, right? So these gases are all rising up in the air, and since our Earth is sort of an envelope of gases, our atmosphere, and these gases are not allowed to escape. They are trapped within the atmosphere, which is why they are actually raising the global temperatures, because these gases, they can capture the radiation from sun or any heat that is coming up from the Earth's surface, and they can capture it. And this is why the global temperatures are rising, because these things are trapped, they cannot leave, right? So that's what global warming is, and that's what climate change is, rising of temperatures. Because of rise of temperatures, we are looking at glaciers melting, sea levels rising, communities being destroyed, communities which are in the low-lying areas, low-lying areas, not flatlands. Then we've seen intermittent rains, we are seeing harsh seasonal changes, we are seeing bad weather, we are seeing climate change in general. Places which used to be cold now are not as much cold as they should have been 50 years ago, let's say, right? Because of climate change. And all this climate change can be blamed on industrialization, yes, and not necessarily the first world countries, because it's not their fault that they are developed, right? But it sort of falls on them now that since they are developed guys and they have developed countries, and they have the money and resources, it is a question that do they stop their carbon emission causing activities, and because they have the money and they have the resources to make a shift to renewable resources or not, or should they be keeping business as usual, and should they be giving out money or giving out technological support or some sort of aid to developing economies, which will actually come up with better solutions? And because now there's a very good line that I read through in an article, really not sure which journal or which paper that was, but it said that any economic growth or any economic development is backed by is coupled with carbon emissions. Right? Look at China, for instance. Look at India, for instance. All right? India is as compared to China and other bigger economies, India is not that emission causing. But to be honest, to be fair with you, India does not have a lot of energy efficient schemes or equipment, or not as general public is not as much aware, or rather does not really care about emissions as such, as much as they care about their own livelihoods, right? So, which is again fair for a country with such a wide diverse demographics and everything. But look at China for the same demography, right? China has come up as a world leader in terms of economy, in terms of better lifestyle, in terms of the general public, right? So China is now generally classified between medium to high income groups, right? MIG, HIG. So they are just about one pedestal below from being called developed, right? And India is still developing that way because we still have a major portion, a major chunk of a majority of the population surviving within the low income or very low income groups, right? VLIG, LIG, and we have not yet reached the MIG, HIG band as China has. And again, China is sort of, I would not talk about politics as such, but China is a bit more of a capitalist economy. And communist, of course. Communist is a political system, but a capitalist economy. They actually make sure that whatever technology there is out in the world, either they replicate that for a cheaper labor and make a market for that, or get that technology, make it as cheap as they can and use it. Right? So China is really coming up with big solar farms and other things. Although it is still emission causing, but then China has got different reforms and policies underway, which are actually quite good, to be honest. I mean, if you have a read about those things, they're really, really amazing to have a look and understand, okay, wow, 10 years ago, China and India were sort of called together, parallel, and we were both developing economies. And right now, what just happened? China, within the last 10 years, 20 years, China has just leapt across everything. So those are the sort of things that we are lacking in India. Now, so climate change, we've talked about that, but yeah, so what was I talking about in climate changes? How do you get these emissions to stop or curtail or reduce? How do you basically stick to Paris Agreement? How do you basically make sure that with the activities, with the economic activities that you're still carrying out, you can still stay below the 2-degree temperature rise before 2050? Right? How do you do that? To understand how do we do that, to understand global warming, we understood that yes, there is emissions and we need to curb down our emissions. Now, how do you curb down your emissions? So first, you basically look at the emission causing sources. So primary emission causing sources are energy intensive energy intensive industries, basically generating of electricity, right? Extraction of oil from the earth or from the seabed, extraction of coal mining, burning of these fossil extraction, mining, and burning of these fossil fuels basically is causing the maximum emissions that they can. Secondly, now we step it down a notch. We know that all the cars, all the transport in the world, including light road transport, rail transport, air transport, water transport, everything basically, right, involves usage of fossil fuels. Leaving aside the electric vehicles currently that we have everywhere, they are proliferating, mind you, but not as much as the fossil fuel cars are. So these are the two major segments where you have these emissions. Now, how do you curb down these emissions? Right? Because we can't go negative emissions, but how do you make sure that you still have the same amount of energy being supplied to the public whilst making sure that you are not using fossil fuel sources. So you go for renewable energy. Cool. That's for energy production. Again, that's a clean form of energy, green form of energy, and has practically no emissions, has practically zero cost raw material. Coal comes at a cost. Fossil fuels, they come at a cost. Sunshine, wind, tidal energy, the tides, the waves, geothermal energy, they do not come at a cost, right? They're free. They're freely available, and that's what the definition of renewable energy sources is, and they will continue to be, all right? Not just freely available, they'll be perennial, and they're not seasonal. They are continuously happening, and they are non-exhaustible. You just can't, suck up all the air from the earth and be like, yeah, okay, there's no more air now. No, you can't do that. So it's a natural phenomena, and hence there is practically no raw material which is carbon intensive, which is why these electricity generation sources or energy generation sources are practically clean. Okay. So talking about renewable energy sources, we know there's a couple of sources. We've got solar, we've got wind, we've got geothermal, we've got tidal, we've got wave, we've got ocean thermal, we've got geothermal, we've got a couple of others. I'm not a hydro, but then hydro has sort of been. So renewables and hydro are not put together because the definition of renewables is something that does not displace a lot of wildlife and in inherent habitat of human beings if at all they are there, and hydro sort of does that. So let's just keep hydro out of renewables, but hydro again is a clean form of energy, okay, just as solar and wind are, because that's even a natural resource, non-emission causing. So these are the sources, all right, and then these are basically used in generation facilities, making big solar farms, which are big power plants. They produce DC power, direct current, and then you can either store them into batteries in the same form, DC form, or transport send it to the grid for usage via transmission lines via the grid, basically substation and then the grid. Step it up a bit because the voltage is really low, and you have to have long distance transmissions because solar farms are essentially not placed where the end user is or where the grid is. They are placed where the solar resource is actually good and the land acquisition is fairly easy. Land acquisition is a whole other topic. We might get into that if somebody asks. Otherwise, let's just stay out of that topic. You can learn about that on your own time. It's something that I would not want to get into. It's a large topic. It's a big topic, immense. And of course, wind sources. Then you've got big wind farms. They vary between each of the turbine that there is varies between now 2.5 megawatt to 4 megawatt, sometimes even 5 if they're offshore wind farms. So onshore wind farms are usually between 2.5 megawatt to 4 megawatt per turbine. And then based on the capital available or based on the land area available again. So you have the capacity of a wind farm or a solar farm that you go on, decide and design and commission, rather, build and commission. And geothermal is still an upcoming technology, but then it has certain problems with itself. I think it's a bit dark. Let me just a second. Yeah, should be bright now. Okay, sorry. What was I saying? Yeah, so geothermal energy is fairly requires a fair bit of work by hand because you need to know where the geothermal site is, and it is again location dependent, and it's not easy and not as convenient and not as viable as solar and wind are, right, across the globe. And new technologies, new renewable technologies are coming up, like the tidal. Tidal energy basically works on, you've got tides coming in, and you've got long narrow shafts, and you have a turbine rotor in that, and the tides come through, rotor spins, and That's how you generate your electricity. Just like hydro, basically, but based on tidal energy. It's connected to electrical energy conversion. And even those require specific sites where you have sort of bays, okay? And shallow, not too shallow bays, you need some deep bays, like, but those deep bays have been previously used as harbors. So it's a bit difficult to get this construction done. So it's not rather easy. And pretty much the same with wave energy. Wave energy has basically pistons moving, which are kept near the shore. And when the waves hits the shore, these pistons move up and down, and that's how your energy is created. It's a good technology. It's easy to float across. But the thing is, whatever energy you produce is fairly low as compared to what solar and wind farms can do. So these technologies still need a bit of working, a bit of revisions, and better designs so that they can actually produce the megawatt scale energy that we are looking for. Because or otherwise you need like massive proliferation of immense on big structures or multiple structures so that you can actually get the usable amount of power, usable amount of energy that you require, right? Not just kilowatt scale. Yeah, for a small community, that works. But for us powering up a city, but powering up a grid, sending it to a grid, it's fairly inconvenient, right? To produce kilowatt of power. That's practically stupid to get that done, to be honest. It does not form a business case, so nobody would actually do that investment. Okay. Then there's basically it's everything. Sorry, there's a question here. Since we have reserved for only 50 years, could you pose that question again? I cannot see it. Since there's only 50 years of petroleum. Okay, I think I could not answer the first question. I'm not sure if both the questions were same, but the second question was about nuclear reactors on ISS and launches. Is it possible? Oh, okay. So nuclear sciences and nuclear energy itself, it's a whole another domain that goes to life sciences and physics aspects of it. I would not venture a lot of into nuclear, but in my thought, this is again my personal belief, nuclear is quite safe when it is still on the Earth, okay? Because you can actually control using the control rods and cooling water, you can actually control the reaction and stop it once you do not require it. Otherwise, if it goes out into space, okay, I will get to this again. Yeah, I do have all the questions here. All right. So yeah, basically about the space, I do not think it's really safe to let the nuclear reactors be forming IC engines or rocket boosters for rocket propulsion or space going out into space, or putting it on the International Space Station as well, as the question said, because it's not really safe. We do not really know how they would react, how the nuclear reactions would have counter effects on space as well. Sorry, so I think it's still better to go with it on the Earth. All right. The next question. So according to you, is it okay? The question says, according to me, is it a good decision to discontinue all diesel engines like safety norms BS4 and BS6? Yes, my dear friend. I would really want all the diesel and all the petrol engines, so basically IC engines, to be discontinued as a norm, as a policy. But sadly, that cannot happen because majority, like it's a very fair, it's a very straight economic question. Would you want to go buy yourself an electric bike or electric car, let's say, tomorrow? Just go out and do that tomorrow. if the government says that all these IC engines are banned from tomorrow? Can you go do that? No, that's not how governments work. That's not how countries should work, right? So there are policies which actually phase out these sort of engines and these sort of things eventually, one by one, step by step at a time. Even I used to be that radical in my approach, but yeah, it's stupidity to get that done in just a snap and get it all out. All in one go. We are not running a monarchy here. We are running a democracy, and that's how democracies work, essentially. Alrighty, did I answer all questions? Okay, yeah, so no, not exact. So the thing is, for petroleum, yes, we do have reserves for about 85 to 90 years now, given the demand of oil that we have right now, or let's say not just oil, fossil fuel, let's say. Fossil fuel covers everything. Given the demand that we have for fossil fuel right now, if this does not increase, right, then we have the reserves for 85 years, as far as I know. The reserve that you talked about that's going out in 50 years is mostly OPEC nations, oil producing nations, so the Gulf, right? Those are the countries which might have depleting resources. Otherwise, Dubai is ending Dubai has sort of finished its oil reserves this year mostly, right? And I think the maximum they can survive with their own reserves is up until next year, and they are decommissioning their oil fields. After that, they are actually switching to renewables altogether, and of course developing tourism, because that's how the revenue for Dubai is generated, with tourism. And they are in fact in talks for building a big solar farm, because good resource, right? So they can power up their entire city using that solar farm by itself, without even, with of course battery storage, not just solar farms. So energy storage is also a huge thing that's coming up as a research topic, as a debatable topic in general, because we have only invested in energy sources and alternate fuel and these things. We have not really invested in storage ever, except for maybe hydro or pumped hydro or battery. Yes, but battery technology we're still about 50 years behind what we should have, we could have, we would have. So yeah, that's my take on energy storage as well. I think it's pretty much answered. I answered everything that's up here. Any more questions, anybody? So I can't hear you. Just a second, I need to unmute you, I think.
You can continue with the session. I'll be posting the questions if they come.
Oh, all right, cool. That works.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
No worries. Yeah, so what was I talking about? Forgot. Okay, so renewable energy, yes. Now, renewable energy is actually prospering everywhere. I'm not sure if you guys know of this, but India was supposed to reach 30% of its total generation capacity was to be converted to renewables by 2020. All right. And I feel immense proud to tell you that India has actually surpassed that mark. We are producing 33% of our electricity from renewable sources in 2019. So we are already ahead a year than what we had promised. And now, in terms of electric vehicles, India has come up with a very overarching target, and India has said that they want to phase out all IC engines by 2030. Just to answer your question, just to add to your question, Mike, India, there's something called the FAME and FAME 2 these are two schemes by the government, which is called fast adoption and manufacturing of electric vehicles. FAME. That's a scheme by the government of India under Jawaharlal Nehru National Solar Mission Plan, right? Of 2012. So when we are absolutely unaware of what solar plans or solar schemes that the government is investing or working through for back in 2012 were, so they had already started working on electric vehicles and fast adaptation adaptation and manufacturing of electric vehicles back in 2015, I guess, right, when electric vehicles were not as big a talk in India. But my colleagues here who have been in touch with and spoken to and about the space, they've already told me they have worked in the government. I think that's a lady from Gujarat, and she's worked with the government, and she's worked with the local farmers as well, where the government is actually providing subsidies and aid for adaptation of solar farms. So a chunk of the land of the farmers is being converted into large solar farms, and they are sending that electricity. They are selling that electricity to the grid, and based on that electricity that they're exporting to the grid, basically, that's the technical term, they are making money out of it. All right. So this works like feed-in tariff. So essentially, if you buy electricity from your energy energy provider, that's so. So if you buy electricity from them, you pay them. You pay them for the electricity that you've purchased. Okay. Now, if you produce your own electricity using solar panel up your roof, you first so there's two different ways you can use that energy or make money. Okay. There's something called a net metering scheme, and there's something called a gross metering scheme. So you generally, all the standard meter boxes in India are gross meters. So what happens is the solar energy that you're producing, it does not supply anything to your needs, to your house. Okay. Whatever you're producing, it is directly connected via that meter, and it directly goes into the grid. All right. So let's say this is the energy that you are creating from solar power, PV panels on your rooftop. This is flowing through the meter to the grid, and this is electricity flowing from the meter, from the grid through the meter to your house. Okay. It's like this. So what happens is basically whatever units of energy you have bought from your provider and whatever units of energy you have sold to your provider, you negate that. Let's say you bought 10 units of energy for a month and you send 5 units of energy for a month, you essentially pay for 5 units of energy. Okay, 10 minus 5, 5, that's what you pay for. But that's through the gross metering scheme. But what happens through net metering scheme is your meters are upgraded to become smart meters. Now, these smart meters are very smart because, of course, power electronics has come into play now. So what happens is these smart meters, they actually look at the load that you have at that moment. Okay, when your solar panels are producing energy, your solar panels send it to that meter, and that meter looks at the power demand in your house at that time and try to first use the solar power that you have produced instead of buying anything from the grid. Okay, so that is what your meter by itself does. Now, these smart meters are very good and modern devices. They have app-based monitoring schemes also. You can actually have a look what amount of solar was produced, what amount of solar that you have used, and what is the amount of energy that you have bought from the grid, and basically sort of know what your utility bills are going to be for the month or for the quarter or however you decide. Okay, so this is called smart metering scheme, where you essentially utilize the energy that you produced for yourself, okay, in your house, and whatever is extra, let's say you have a 5 kilowatt solar panel up on your rooftop, cool, you require energy worth, so 5 kilowatt let's say for 6 hours of operation, usual 6 hours you have full sunshine. Well, that's the calculation in Canberra. But let's say 8 hours. Okay, you have a 5 kilowatt system that works for 8 hours. So you have essentially produced 40 kilowatt hours of electricity. Okay, I'll just call it units for understanding, for a brief understanding, for a common understanding rather. So you've produced 40 units of 40 units of energy in one day. Okay, now your house requires 35 units of energy per day. Okay, so if your demand time, okay, matches when your generation time, your demand time matches your generation time, right? If you have essentially used all 40 units of electricity that you produced using your solar panels without the use of battery storage, you have absolutely had zero bill for that one particular day that your demand time and your generation time were matching. Okay, so you don't require batteries. Now, that is impossible. In general, that's impossible because if you're staying in your house, right? You stay in your house during the evening till the night time, and during the day, mostly you're out. So what happens is you need a battery storage if you actually want to use that energy that you have produced. Okay, so your solar panels produce energy during the daytime, goes into whatever, like your fridge or whatever standby power. There's something called standby power. Your DVDs, your TVs, your microwaves, your Bluetooth systems, or your home theater systems. These, if they're connected to the power and they're still on, these require standby power, very minimal power though. But your fridges, mostly, they're refrigerators, they are mostly on throughout the day, right? Mostly they are on 24/7. If you are running air conditioners, if you're running heaters, anything. So that first, whatever energy is produced during the day, it goes into your house first. And if your house does not require the total amount of energy that's being produced, then they send it to the grid. So what happens is finally your bills, they come out as so finally your bills, they come out showing that these are the units of electricity you bought, these are the units of electricity you exported, and they have fixed prices per unit of electricity. Here in Canberra, it's between 9 cents and 11 cents per unit that you sell it for, your electricity, and you buy it for about 23 cents, between 20 and 24 cents, depending on peak usage or non-peak hours or shoulder or different. So these are different terms, basically. Peak hours is basically a load profile, peak demand on the load profile, where the load on the grid is maximum. So between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. here in Australia, it's usually considered that your demand is maximum because everybody's getting ready. So everybody's charging their cell phones, and everybody's laptops are hooked onto the power plugs to charge. Somebody might be cooking, somebody might be using a microwave, or maybe a hot water system, right? So different things, different activities that people are doing between 7 and 9, which is why the peak period is 10, because you suddenly see a peak in your load profile. Similarly, between evening 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. is when the peak hours start again. Sorry, I just stopped to read this question, and I'll go on after I answer this. So the question says, will the solar panel placed on top of the car be able to run the engine? Yes, with the sort of efficiencies that we are looking at now. And okay, so currently the sort of solar panels that we have, they might not be able to run a car in itself because the solar panels are very heavy. Okay, and the sort of power that you require for a car, and solar panels are big as well, right? So maybe you can have take a standard car, take a standard sedan, and looking at the size of the roof that you have for a car, maybe half a kilowatt is what you can install, right? Now, half a kilowatt, while your car is moving and whatever energy is being produced cannot go directly feed your engine. It has to first be stored in a battery, of course, but the power that will be produced is not sufficient, first off. Secondly, if we look at the efficiencies and the size of the solar panels that have suddenly shrunk, so we've got thin film cells as well, but if you go for thin film cells, you can have a bigger sized or bigger and lighter sized, lighter capacity, bigger capacity and lighter size solar panels up on your car, but they degrade very quickly. So let's say you have to keep changing your solar panels on the car every 6 months. Let's say, I'm not giving you a rough, exact figure. It's just a rough figure. Read up some articles about thin film cells, cadmium. Sorry, my bad. Amorphous silicon cells, thin film, and cadmium. I'm not really sure which cells are those again. That's a lot of physics and a lot of semiconductor physics involved, and I do not particularly like that subject as such. So yeah, so which is why I think it's practically infeasible and rather stupid idea to place solar panels on top of a car. Rather, what you can do is have solar panels at your home, okay? And make sure you have a battery at your home, okay? Then get yourself an electric vehicle. Charge your electric vehicle using the power that you produce from your solar panels. You are essentially running a zero emission transport for yourself, right? You do not charge your car using fossil fuel energy. You do not run your car using fossil fuel energy, except for the plastic cups that you might be using in the car while driving, maybe sipping a coffee or whatever. Except for that, you have sort of become emission-free in your terms of transport. So that's a good thing. So that would be a better thing to go for. So does the sea pollution affect the harness of tidal energy to generate electricity? Not exactly. Not exactly. It does not affect the tidal energy. So there's two different things you need to understand. There's a wave energy. There's tidal energy. These two are different things. The wave energy, the sea pollution does not really affect energy making capacity of these two sources, but what it affects is the wildlife. Okay, we've been blessed on this earth. We've been blessed with a variety of natural species and 100 lot of things, and obviously we consume seafood as well. So if at all that seafood is infected with some sort of pollution that we have caused and ultimately we are eating. So there have been reports where people have had consumed fish and they could actually find a plastic wrapper within that fish. Okay, and it has actually choked human beings. So we have to be aware of these things. Like, fine, let's not do it for the environment. Let's just do it for our selfish motives that you might just say that, yeah, I'll end up not eating seafood at all. Yeah, but somebody else would, right? And they will suffer because of your plastic. So try not polluting try not polluting at all, rather. Try recycling as much as you can. Read up on recycling, how the first world countries are actually taking methods of recycling to a different level, and try reading up on that. And that would help a lot in general. All right. I think the session was about for an hour, and it's already been 15 minutes. So I'll try to. Yeah, cool. That's what exactly. So yeah, we'll have to wind up in 10 minutes. I'd appreciate quick brief questions if there's any. Okay. Yeah, if there's quick and brief questions, if any. Otherwise, I'd like to say, first off, thanks to Venkatramani sir for actually making something this huge, this good a portal for the alumni to actually interact and talk about. And I'd also like to thank Nakul for being at the university and still being that drive, with that passion, still working towards betterment of students and you opening up the Alumni Charter as well, helping Venkatramani sir. With special thanks to Anand for having a chat, having coordinated everything with me. There was a lot of help, Anand. Thank you. And yeah, so I think I'm on LinkedIn as well, and LinkedIn as a portal of communication is a very good uh, tool. Rather, you can actually get jobs based on your LinkedIn, based off of your LinkedIn profile. I've got one, which is I'm telling you. Uh, I've been hired sort of because of my LinkedIn profile. So yes, it's not a myth. It is very true, in fact, that recruiters or some industry guys, they actually look at your LinkedIn profile and just send a message outrightly. Try networking as much as you can, and I'd be really happy to connect with everybody and anybody on LinkedIn, whoever wants to come through. I think Anant did ask me for my LinkedIn profile, so he might just, Anant, if you could just share my LinkedIn profile on the video link or the link as well, that'd be great. Yeah. Uh, and please happy to connect with everybody on LinkedIn. No Facebook, no Twitter, no Instagram, because I keep my professional and personal life separate. So that's for personal life. Let's just let that be. Avoid it. And I do not take any professional questions through those media, those portals. LinkedIn is a better option if you would want to go for. Connect with me. Everything's fine. Post your questions. I'm very happy to help. Very happy to answer. Be patient. There are going to be times when I might just, outrightly can't answer everything, but eventually I'll get to it. So don't just be patient. All right. And yeah, well, that's pretty much it. Is there anything else that I want to talk about? Yeah, so I'm a since my entire struggle was because I'm a chemical engineer by background, and mostly people who are in the field of renewable energy are from either mechanical, civil, or electrical, because basically it is sort of their field. Okay, it has always been, because renewable energy as such is a derived form of all engineering, or it's an amalgamation of all engineering forms that we have, and then it's been derived out of it, and a new branch has come up, a new discipline has come up. All right. Otherwise, nobody recognizes me as a renewable energy engineer as such. I'm telling you, there's nothing called a renewable energy engineer, although it's it's an effect, it's a phenomenon now. But yeah, nobody actually sort of recognizes this term, this understanding, because everybody thinks that because essentially the people who are working in renewables right now have all come from a mechanical, civil, or electrical background, right? Because that was the nature of the work back then. But now you have specialized courses, you have specialized engineers, you have specialized personnel who's actually focusing just on that. Mechanical focuses on a variety of things and not just renewable, right? Renewables is just one small aspect of mechanical, heat transfer, stuff like that. And for electrical, yeah, it sort of more relates with grid integration of renewables, basically hooking up all the generation facilities to the grid. It's a heavy topic again, and just as land acquisition. So yeah, just don't steer clear of it. But if you have the interest, read up about it, and I'm happy to take questions on that as well. Not questions exactly, but happy to discuss on that as well. And we're happy to discuss what I'm working in at the moment, except for some proprietary material and some trade secrets that I will not be able to talk about. I can talk about everything and anything that I work on. I'm happy to collaborate with people on projects if at all they have any. Just not taking credit, nothing, just advising if I can, because that sort of lets me be in touch with everything that's going out there, and that's my personal interest. So happy to help if I can. Yeah, I mean, I can absolutely advise on chemical engineering projects. some mechanical engineering projects, renewable for sure, anything, not as much electrical, but happy to look into it if at all I'm asked for help. And yeah, I mean, I'm good to go with major projects that you might have in your B.Tech final year thesis or any master's project that you might want to go for. And I'm happy to discuss topics and subjects as well, right? And do not ask me technical doubts as such, because yeah, I can't solve a numerical for you right now and give to you. But yeah, don't make me solve your exam papers. No. But otherwise, I'm fine with everything. And yeah, again, happy to collaborate. We have just 4 minutes left for this, and it was an amazing discussion. Anand, would you like to conclude, or am I taking any more questions in the 4 minutes? Let me just unmute you. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. I think that was a wonderful experience, and we might have grasped almost all the knowledge that you gave us. And thank you for taking time out from your busy schedule.
No,
I would also like to thank the audience for being so patient and giving the questions. One request to the audience that the link will be given below, and you can write your feedback. And thank you so much. Thank you,
good.
sir.
Thank you.